Hi friends, Right Careers welcomes you to another new video. This is Yes Sudarshan, your career coach. Before we get on to this week's video, the customary thing, in case you have subscribed to my YouTube channel, thank you so much. And in case you haven't, do click on the subscription button and bell button for instant notifications of career and parenting related videos on a regular basis. So moving on to this week's topic, one of the important things or one of the prominent things that we see in today's generation, is about making a career for themselves. That is becoming an entrepreneur. Now, entrepreneur 10 years back or 20 years back was different from the entrepreneurs of today. Today, becoming an entrepreneur is not as difficult as what it was few years ago, few decades ago. So we see a lot of students, a lot of youngsters, a lot of mid-age professionals turn entrepreneurs at different phase of life, I would say. But then when you become or when you turn entrepreneur, there are a lot of things that you need to know because all along, if you've been working for someone, you can be confined to the subject knowledge of yours. But then if you are going to be an entrepreneur, you have to drive the business completely, which means you need to understand the 360-degree facets of running the show, running a business. And that's why I thought I should do a video on something that's related to entrepreneurship, or rather budding entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur. So the topic that I thought I can discuss for this week is 20 important things, or 20 as jargons, I would say, that every aspiring entrepreneur should know from different perspectives. So which are these perspectives? To run an organization, you need to understand 360-degree facets, I said. So what are those? Those could be from the perspective of marketing research, it could be from the perspective of finance, HR, marketing, operations, capitalization, financial, legal, etc. So from these 360-degree facets, we will break down into different terminologies for you to understand the basics of starting something or being on your own. Right? So we will start with marketing research perspective. Now, before starting any venture or business, the first thing that we got to do is to research about that, right, in different perspectives. So in marketing research, I thought I'll take two or three aspects. We'll touch two or three aspects. The first being the target market. Now you need to know who your target market is, right? Then only you can cater to the business. You can't be targeting the world, for example. You can't be targeting a larger if you can target a larger community, you can target a minor community, a small community, but then you got to target somebody. For example, in a simple layman language, if you're going to start an apparel store, you got to target. Is it going to be for children? It's going to be for men or women, or it's going to be for all? I know there are a lot of companies these days that are exclusively, into a plus size dresses, attires, which means their focus is very clear. We're not going to do about the normal clothing, plus style clothing. So something like that, I'm going to be a traditional merchandiser or traditional cloth seller or Western cloth. So you got to understand who your target audience is, right? So the first basic element of market research. Under market research, I would also say something related to competition analysis. Now, obviously, you're not going to be there is nothing called monopoly today. Even in government, there is nothing called monopoly because there is going to be competition, and there are competition everywhere. So before you start something, you need to understand who your competition is. It could be a pure competition or a generic competition. By generic competition, I'll give you an example. Once we asked a question to the CEO of Coca-Cola India. Now, is Pepsi your competition? It's a basic question. Is Pepsi your competition, or Miranda your competition, or Thumbs Up your competition? The answer still astonished, and that time it astonished me. It still fascinates me. The answer that he gave was, yes, for Coke, Pepsi is not the competition. The competition is water. Why? Because water is a thirst quencher, and Coke is also a thirst quencher, which means for us the competition is generic. Anything, even tender coconut is a thirst quencher. So for us, the competition comes from water and tender coconut. It need not be Pepsi, and it could also be Pepsi. So you got to understand who your competition is, and then you got to understand your strength, your weakness, their weakness, your opportunity, their opportunity, and where the threat comes from. Basically, a SWOT analysis that we call of your competition. So these two, the target market and the competition analysis, comes under the marketing research terms. Moving on, the financial terms, some of the financial terms that as a budding entrepreneur that you need to know. Yes, mostly most of the entrepreneurs kind of ignore this, but it's very important because otherwise you can't run a business without finance, right? It's the blood is the blood flow of any business, right? So the first terminology that as an entrepreneur that you need to know from the finance perspective is cash flow. So as the name itself suggests, what is cash flow? Cash that flows in, right, comes in and then goes out. So any form of cash coming in and going out, you need to monitor, you need to understand what it is. Positive cash flow means your company is doing good, and negative cash flow, you need to improve it, turn it into positive. So how you do, you know better. So cash flow is a term that you need to know. The second important thing that you need to know from the financial perspective is the gross margin. As the name itself suggests, the difference between the revenue that you get out of selling something and the actual cost of the good, cost of the goods or services that you. The actual cost means the production cost, the transportation cost, the distribution margin cost, etc. Difference between this and the revenue that you make out of the product is called as gross margin. So you need to know what gross margin is. The third financial term that you need to know is a burn rate. These days, burn rate is very common. What do you mean by burn rate? The rate at which your company spends your cash reserves. Every business will have a cash reserve to spend, right? You offer freebies, you offer initial free, you offer initial discount when you start. So this is the burn rate. You spend from your pocket. So you need to know what your burn rate is. So three terminologies in finance, that's a takeaway: cash flow, gross margin, burn rate. So these are the things that you need to know from financial perspective. Moving on, the third important perspective is the legal perspective, which many people, it's once again not so common because it's not a part of your core business, right? But it's very important because only when you legally register, you can do business in India or any other country. So the first point, first important terminology that you need to know from a legal perspective is the intellectual property. What is intellectual property? The legal ownership of your product, the legal ownership of your inventions or designs or your work, etc. It has to be registered, it has to be patented, it has to be copyrighted. So that is intellectual property. So that's the first thing, how you do through a legal procedure. The second one is the contract. So legally, contract is what? Legally binding agreements between more than one party, two or more party, that outlines the term of business relationship. So contract is essential. So from a legal perspective, you need to know what intellectual property is. That is the ownership, patent, copyrights, and also the contract between buyer and seller or two different parties. So that's the legal perspective. Moving on, the marketing terms. Some of the marketing terms that you need to know. I would say two things in marketing: branding and advertising comes top of my mind. Brand, what is a brand? It's a collection of perspective about you, about your products in front of your customers. That's branding. So from a brand perspective, you need to identify the name of your company, name of your brand, design a logo, design color combinations, how uniform it is and things like that. So basically you establish some a communication through the brand. And then the advertising. Branding and advertising are two different things. Branding is you create something. Advertising is you spend money to develop the product, to develop the brand through different forms. It could be to reach out to your audience, right? It could be through print media or digital media, whatever media that you want to. But then you pay the money and then reach out your products or services to your target group. So that's advertising. The third important thing in marketing that you need to know in today's perspective is the social media marketing. So we all know, right? In social media, you have Facebook, you have Instagram, you have LinkedIn, X, YouTube, etc. There are many new age marketers who actually sell or buy everything over online instead of going the traditional way. So you got to understand how these tools like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or X works in selling your product to your target audience. So these are three marketing terminologies that you need to know. Moving on to the next segment, which is the operations perspective, the operations terminology. Two key takeaways in operations terminology. You need to understand what logistics is. So what is logistics? Logistics is flow of goods from one place to another, right? Maybe from the buyer to the seller. So that is logistics. This includes the transportation, the warehousing, if at all it's there, the inventory management, stock clearing, stock keeping, etc. So that's logistics. The second important thing in operations is the supply chain. So what is supply chain? Supply chain is technically, technically, if you ask me, the definition is the network of companies or the organizations that are involved in production to selling. So it's not that only you're going to produce, you're going to sell. There will be a lot of players involved, right? For transportation, there will be someone involved. It could be digital transportation these days, like Amazon, Flipkart. It could be delivery partners. So the entire companies or organization that's involved right from pre-production till it reaches the actual consumers or the users is called supply chain management. You need to understand. So from operations perspective, two things: the logistics and the supply chain management. Moving on, the next important terminology that you need to know is from the HR perspective, the human resource perspective. Yes, the first thing that comes to my mind is onboarding. So what is onboarding? Where you recruit an employee and then make them comfortable, give them proper infrastructure for them to work. That's onboarding. The second one is once you onboard, you make them work. So for that, obviously, you need to have a performance management where you define their goals, you define their targets, you define what are they going to do, and then you also need to train them. So performance management and training comes the second aspect in HR. And then the benefits part, the compensation, the salary part, the non financial part that you're going to do, benefit and things like this. So many benefits that you can devise. So these are the three important aspects from the HR perspective: onboarding, training, and performance management, and then eventually benefits. Moving on to the last segment, from the perspective of capitalization, some of the terminologies that you need to know from the capitalization perspective. Seed funding comes to me at the top of the main trigger. So what is seed funding? As the name itself suggests, seed means small, right? So small seed. So people will usually invest in small business or ideas so that it becomes big. So usually these seed funders are someone from the family. It could be friends. It could be an angel investor also. So seed funding is a term you need to know. The second is the VC. VC is venture capital. So venture capital are organizations or people. Usually they invest in some company. It could be a startup. It need not be a startup also. But then they will ask for some stake in your organization. So those are called venture capitalists. That's the second capitalization terms. And finally, you also need to know what angel investors are. Angel investors are investors who will invest in you, but then they will not reveal their identity. But they will still have some stake in you, but they will not reveal their identity. Usually happens in startups. So these are the three terminologies that you need to know in capitalization: seed funding, a venture capital, and angel investors. Right. So understanding these jargons are definitely an important aspect if you want to start any business or any venture. And if you want to know more about more terminologies or want to know how to go about starting a venture, you can always contact us. We'll be happy to help you or to connect you with the right people in your domain to set up a strong entrepreneurship base. And all the credentials are mentioned beneath this video. And until next week with another new video, see you all. Take care. Have a safe week. Thank you.